My name is Patrick Costas. I'm 38 years old. I have 2 daughters and a wonderful wife. My grandfather fought in World War II. He landed at Normandy and fought on for a couple of months until a German mortar nearly cut him in half. My father fought multiple tours in Vietnam until a .50 caliber bullet took his leg off. These men were, naturally, my heroes growing up. All I ever wanted to do was join the U.S. military. When I was 18, that's what I did. I joined the United States Air Force in 1997. I fought in Iraq, and in 2009, I retired medically from the Air Force due to a spine injury. It wasn't until after I left the military that I realized the government I risked my life for had poisoned me for months. Starting in 2001, the U.S. military faced many challenges. The worst terrorist attack in American history had just occurred. The longest war in our history had just begun. President Bush had ordered the elimination of the Taliban government that controlled Afghanistan. As always happens in war, the problems needed Alexandrian solutions. Quick solutions. One of the problems that needed a quick solution was what to do with all the American soldiers' trash. On average, a U.S. soldier in Iraq or Afghanistan generates 10 pounds of trash a day. Obviously, this refuse could not be allowed to accumulate on American bases. One tried and tested method was open to U.S. commanders: open-air burn pits. Open-air burn pits had been used in Vietnam. But, in that war, the soldiers did not produce massive amounts of plastic water bottles, plastic silverware, and styrofoam plates, all of which are hazardous to breathe when burned. The military didn't stop at just burning plastic silverware. They began burning much more toxic trash, such as lithium-ion batteries, plastic chemical drums, nylon, tires, wires, and tarps, and the list goes on. Perhaps one of the most disturbing items burned in the pits was amputated body parts and other medical waste.
ABR, a subsidiary of Halliburton, they actually they were the contractor that operated and constructed the burn pits. And they burned anything and everything in these burn pits.
But was it their recommendation?
No, it was they took their orders from DOD.
Now, how much did the government and military and these corporations with these contracts, how much did they actually know about what was going on and what was potentially hazardous to soldiers' health? Because in the book you describe, a soldier would stand there on duty on post and just breathe in this toxic fume for 8, 6, 7 hours a day.
It was, it's pretty obvious when you burn styrofoams, plastic, treated wood, human body parts, medical waste. These things should not be burned in a burn pit that size when you have soldiers working and housed downwind from this stuff. Mm-hmm. And they really didn't take it into consideration. There was not one military regulation at the time. And it's hard to believe when I'm in the military and I know that, they have regulation for everything. It's all the way to your hair,
Exactly.
But there's no regulation put in place on how to construct or where to construct these burn pits or what can be burned in them.
The history of the U.S. government poisoning its soldiers begins with the Vietnam War. In an effort to deny the communists hiding places within the jungle, defoliants were used on South Vietnamese jungles. President John F. Kennedy authorized the use of a defoliant known as Agent Orange in November 1961. A major ingredient in Agent Orange was dioxin. The first shipment of Agent Orange arrived in Vietnam on January 9, 1962. The missions to dispense the defoliant were known as Operation Ranch Hand missions. The United States Air Force reports that 6,542 spraying missions took place during Ranch Hand. These missions took place from 1962 to 1971. By 1971, 12% of the total area of South Vietnam had been sprayed with defoliant, an estimated 10 million hectares of agricultural land was destroyed. TCDD concentrations in soil and water were hundreds of times greater than what the EPA considers safe. Returning veterans began developing serious medical issues that they attributed to Agent Orange exposure. Some of the health issues included tumors, birth defects, rashes, psychological symptoms, and cancers. The same problems were seen with the Vietnamese population as well. Veterans began filling out claims with the Department of Veterans Affairs, citing their exposure to dioxin in Vietnam. The VA denied these claims unless they could prove the condition began when they were in service or within 1 year of their discharge. Of course, given the nature of dioxin poisoning, this was completely unreasonable. Veterans who merely wanted medical treatment for issues related to dioxin poisoning were laughed off by VA officials. This happened to my own father when he sought treatment for dioxin poisoning. Not until 1991 did Vietnam veterans finally have their medical issues, which resulted from exposure to Agent Orange, addressed. Unfortunately, this came much too late for thousands of veterans. Congress enacted the Agent Orange Act, giving the Department of Veterans Affairs the authority to declare certain conditions presumptive to exposure to Agent Orange. Finally, Vietnam veterans were eligible to receive treatment and compensation for their conditions. The burn pits are called this generation's Agent Orange, and it truly is. Just like our fathers went through in Vietnam, we are now being ignored by our government again. Burn pit exposure is killing soldiers at a much higher rate than Agent Orange did. There is no doubt action is needed on this issue immediately. This will be a continuing series on this issue. I will not rest and I will not stop until all my sick brothers and sisters in arms receive the treatment they deserve from the government they served. This has been Patrick Costas.
Please subscribe to our channel, PH News, Fact-Based Media.